Jew, the indestructible Jew. And we see, we've already made mention of it, the Old Testament. Well, the book of Genesis from 1 to 12, general stuff. After 12, straight down to the end, it's Abraham and his family. Whole book of Genesis, the rest of it is that about Abraham and his family. The rest of the books, the prophets, the kings, are about Jews, the history of the Jews, what all took place with the Jews. And so if you don't believe that you should study the Jews, then you're reading the wrong book, because the Bible is about these Jews. Old Testament, straight through Jews. And not in respect God is looking at the world. He does have that in his mind, but he emphasizes the world through the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. Amos is about the Jews. And Zephaniah is about the Jews. And Haggai is about the Jews. And Zechariah is about the Jews. Everything, the Old Testament is Jewish history. We come into the New Testament, we have information again, the stress is on the Jews again, and how everything relates to the Jews, and particularly with the Lord Jesus Christ in the Gospels, how Christ came, how he lived among the Jews, how he connected with the Jews, how he was put to death by the Jews, and that's the Gospel. And then you have the book of Acts and Romans and all of it written in respect to the gospel going out from the Jews. And so we see the Bible, some people call it a Jewish book. Yes, and that's true in one sense. It is a Jewish book, a book that is written to the Jews, about the Jews. And so you ought to be interested in the history of the Jews because it relates a lot to the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 8 tonight, just for a thought right here. Bible says in verse number 1, Deuteronomy 8, all the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. He said, man, giving you this instruction so you can get in that land, man. And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness. He said, you know, you didn't have to go through that, but since you rejected the first time of going in, you had to stay in for 40 years. He led you for 40 years to humble thee and to prove thee and to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger and fed thee with manna which thou knewest not. Neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. Of course, you would have read that in the temptation when Jesus was being tempted by Satan. Jesus quoted right here from Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse number 3. Jesus said, man should not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. You know what I mean? So that's where Jesus quoted it from. And then he goes on, God says, thy raiment wax not old upon thee. Say, man, when I was keeping you all 40 years, not a garment got rotten. Every garment was just as fresh as could be. It waxed not old upon thee. Neither did thy foot swell. Can you imagine walking for 40 years? No car, no truck, no bus. You know what I mean? No bicycle. Walk. Some of them had donkeys. Some of them had animals. Walk. He said, your foot didn't even swell. Man alive, that's some good protection and provision that God gave to them. Verse 4, thy raiment wax not old upon thee, neither thy foot swell these 40 years. Now, I don't know if you ladies would have liked living 40 years, because I know you like to change garment every 40 hours. For 40 years, he said, no change in no garment. Ah, man. Verse 5, thou shalt also consider in thine heart that as a man chasteneth his son, I like that. As a man chasteneth his what? Sound good to me. So the Lord thy God chasteneth thee. So God believes in chastisement, even though they may not believe in it. God believes in it. Therefore, thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, and to walk in his ways, and to fear him. For the Lord thy God bringeth thee into a good land, a land of brooks, and of water, and of fountains, and of depths, that spring out of the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, and a land of oil, olive and honey. Boy, what a land. That's the land they didn't want to go in. They just didn't believe God. A land wherein thou shalt eat bread without scarceness. Good night. I mean, no reason for nobody to be hungry. No reason for anybody to starve. Wow, eat bread without scarceness. Thou shalt not lack anything in it. A land whose stones are iron. Good night. What can't you build from iron? I think that's one of the problems with our land. I mean, we can't make these kind of things. We can't make these cell phones. We can't do all, the other countries do all these stuff. They make all the televisions. They do all the stuff. We don't do it. They call us a third world country. Because, he said stones are iron. And out of those whose hills thou mayest dig brass. Good night. First class country. When thou hast eaten and art full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he had given thee. Then he said, beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, and keeping his commandments and his judgments and his statutes which I command thee this day. Lest when thou eaten and art full, hast builded goodly houses and dwell therein. You get copacetic there. You got your house, you get your home. You say, man, I need nothing else. I straight now. He said, you know what? Then thine heart. He said, when thine herds, verse 13, when thine herds and thy flocks multiply, thy silver and thy gold, when people got money is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied, then thine heart be what? Lifted up. Say, man, I done accomplished this, man. I think it's time for me to retire. He said, you know what? They feel full. They feel like they accomplished it. They feel like they got it all. And they say, I'm out of this now. He said, and when thine herds, thy silver multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied, verse 13, then thine heart be lifted up, and thou, verse 14, thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led thee through the great and terrible wilderness, wherein were fiery serpents and scorpions and drought, and there was no water, who brought thee forth out of the rock of flint, who fed thee in the wilderness with manna, which thy fathers knew not, that he might humble thee, that he might prove thee to do the good at the latter end. And thou say in thine heart, my power and might of mine hand had gotten me this wealth. More people got that state in their mind, There are a lot of people that say, listen, I work hard for my money. And I tell them straight to play, say, if God didn't give you the strength, and you can't work hard. If God don't bless it, you still can't get it. It's like they separate from God. I work hard for my money. And that may be true, but you can't lose God out of that and say he's not involved. Verse 18, thou shalt remember the Lord thy God. Deuteronomy 8:18. This is powerful. For it is he that giveth thee power to do what? To get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. And it shall be, if thou do at all forget the Lord thy God, and walk after other gods, and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day, that ye shall surely perish, as the nation which the Lord destroyed before your face. So shall ye perish, because ye would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord. It's amazing. All these promises in here are connected with the Jew. Connected with the Jew. And I think it's very important to understand that as we deal with the nation of the Jew, it's a very important nation with regards to God. Now, chapter 7, let me show you a couple of verses here. I want to show you why God chose them. Verse 6, chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God had chosen thee to be a special people unto himself. That's what God did with the Jews. He said, special people unto himself. And he said, above what? All people that are upon the face of the earth. He said, the Jews, you're special. Verse 7, the Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you because you were more in number. Not because you was a bunch of people. You were more in number than any people. For you were what? The fewest of all the people. He said, I didn't love you because you had more people. You were the fewest of all people. Verse 8. He said, but because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, had the Lord brought you out of them with a mighty hand and redeemed you out of the house of bondage from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So I was just reading that to show you the Jews are a very, very important and special people to God. His plan was, okay, Israel, I will bless you. You will now bless the world. Israel failed in blessing the world, so God had to provide another way. And of course, today, he works through the Gentiles. That's us. Because the Jews have not yielded themselves. The Jews this day, right now, are still in blindness. From the day that they crucified Christ on the cross and said, let his blood be upon us and upon our children. When they said that, boy, Holocaust, Hitler can destroy 6 million. Mussolini can destroy hundreds of thousands. And around the world, Jews were being slaughtered. Slaughtered. Because they made a statement like that. So as we talk about the Jews tonight, let's cover just a little bit. I think most of this history, as I reiterated tonight, you will know. So I'm going to cover it right off the cuff. Israel, the nation of Israel starts with what man? Somebody. Abraham. Okay. Where was Abraham living? Somebody else. Where was he living when God spoke to him? Anybody else? Where was Abraham living? Say it again. Yes, Ur of the Chaldees, correct. All right? And, of course, he came around, coming down to the land of Egypt. Okay, Abraham had 2 sons. What were their names? Ishmael and Isaac. How many years apart were they? 13 years apart. Which one was the oldest? Okay, Ishmael. Where did Ishmael, how did Abraham come to have a child called Ishmael? What are the stories with respect to that? Okay, somebody got 2 different answers. Put your hand up and I could hear which one is which. How did Abraham come to have a child called Ishmael? Okay, hand up there. Let's try to go ahead. That's Sister Maxine. All right, go ahead. Who was the maid? His wife was the maid? Okay. Okay. Great. I think that's true. I need one more spot in that. That's very important here. Very, very important. One more spot. Where did, and I'll ask it this way, where did, what Abraham's handmaid name? Hagar. Where did Hagar come from? What's that? Egypt, correct. So, we don't know necessarily if she was bright. More than likely she was. She was an Egyptian, okay, from Egypt. So you're talking about the Egyptians and the Jews had no problems when it came down to the coloration and the exchange of, quote, sex. So that's where some of the, quote, black folk get the idea of say, listen, the Jews are black people. Now, is it interrelated? I'm sure it is, because it's not an emphasis with God, because color really doesn't matter. But it's very important to understand she came from Egypt. Okay, very important to understand that. All right, so we now Ishmael and Isaac. What is there particular about Isaac that we should know, that everybody should know as far as Christians are concerned? What should we know about Isaac? He was the promised child. In other words, Ishmael was not the promised child. God says, Abraham, you and Sarah are going to have a child. Sarah, of course, like they said, was barren. And when she conceived, it was miraculous. She was 90 years old. And she had the child called Isaac. Now, what are the particular about Isaac? Isaac had 2 children. He married who? By the way, who did he marry? Isaac and Rebekah. Okay, and they had 2 children. What are they? Jacob and Esau. Esau and Jacob. Which one was first? They were twins. Well, one came out first, that was Esau, and the next one came out right behind, holding on his heel, and that was Jacob. Jacob means supplanter. It means deceiver. It means crooked. That dude could outsmart you left, right, and center. So he had a big part in stealing his brother's birthright. Go ahead. Oh yeah. But he cooperated real well. He went in there. He had to do the fake voice. He had to do all of that. What that boy was, his name means deceiver. And God had chosen him. And this fellow was waiting for the opportunity. Remember now, it started when? What you was going to say? Okay, I think you're around it. It started when they was out. They was out somewhere in the farm, the field. And Isaac and Esau say, "But I need something to eat." And Jacob said, "Hey, sell me your birthright." He started from there. He said, "Sell me your birthright." Hey, he was scheming. He wanted that birthright. So he had a part to play in this thing. It wasn't just mommy. Yeah, boy, right there. He said, "Sell me your birthright." And Esau was so frivolous and so unconcerned, careless. Yeah. He said, "Okay, make a promise." They do whatever they do to make the promise. The handshake, the commitment, or whatever. And he rather eat food and say, "The birthright is yours." Later on, Hebrews, I think 15 says he chapter 12, he sought to get the take him back with tears. And God says, "No, you ain't getting it back no more. You didn't sell it. You counted it. You wasted it. You had an opportunity, and you didn't care about it." And so he didn't see the value in it. He preferred food. He preferred the temporary over the eternal. Sometimes you can't wait. You want to get it now, and you lose out in the future. And so Jacob was a supplanter. Now, how did he become Israel? How did Jacob become Israel? Correct. After he had the resting, like Genesis 32, with the angel. He was resting on an angel. He didn't let the angel go. He said, "You got to bless me. You got to bless me. You got to bless me." What was he afraid of? What was he afraid of? His brother was on his track. And he figured brother can catch up to him the next morning. And his brother said, "Buddy, I got him now." Because his brother was loaded. And Jacob tried a little scheme. He sent one portion of his army that way and one portion of his army the next way. And then he and his wives and children went the next way. And his brother, he was figuring that if he could miss the trail and follow on the wrong trails, and of course he would be free. But it so happened his brother caught up with him the next morning, but there was a change of heart. His brother looked at his wives, his children. He said, "All these your children?" He said, "Yes." He said, and he had them come. He said, y'all bring the gifts, bring the presents. And he said, bring the gifts and presents to his brother Esau. Esau said, tell you what, buddy, let's just be brothers, man. They hug. And he said, I don't need the gifts. That's okay. He said, you're doing good. And then he went on. He had a change of heart. And he decided he wouldn't kill his brother anymore because he was worrying about that. Said, I can kill him. After the brother stole his birthright, he said, I can kill him. Okay, as a result, Jacob became Israel that night when he wrestled with the angel. Israel means one who prevailed, fighting with God. He prevailed with God. God bless. Now, how do we get to Israel? How do we get to Israel? Israel, Jacob, his new name is Israel. He now has how many sons? 12 sons. You know what I'd love for you to look up? He had how many wives? How many? 4. 2 is correct. 2 wives. Hold on. You're not wrong. Hold on. 2 wives and 2 concubines. That's where the 4. Okay, no. So even though they were like wives, they were not considered the wives. Okay? We could go into a whole discussion on that, but I bypass that. But 2 wives, 2 concubines. Now, how many children did these concubines have? 4 of them, the concubines and wives. Remember, okay, we just back up just a little bit. Solomon had how many wives and how many concubines? Yeah, they just said it. Let me go to. Okay, I'm gonna look here. Yeah, he was a political guy. Yeah, he had things under control if any war took place. I'm trying to get 1 Kings 11 out of my. Okay. Okay, he had 1 Kings 11, verse 3. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. 700 wives, princesses. You got that? Yeah, they were kings' daughters. so yeah, we believe it was political. I'll say, okay, so we have these 12. One particular woman, Jacob really loved. Which was that? Rachel. Okay? And of course, Leah and so forth. Now, interesting. 2 children came from Rachel. Who were the 2 children? Joseph and Benjamin. Okay? But Jesus comes from the tribe of which? Which say it again? Judah. Jesus is from the tribe of Judah, and that tribe, I think, came under Leah. One of the children of Leah. So, Leah. Okay, yes. Okay, so it's interesting as you go through them wives and you look and you see what children they had. What children they had, what children they have. You see. Now, all of them are very important because they came from Joseph. They became the sons of Joseph, or the 12 tribes. They turned into tribes of Israel. Okay, meaning children of Joseph. 12 children he had, 12 sons in particular. And so all of them were counted, and God says say it again? Say it again? The 12 sons, they were all important because they came from, Jacob. Jacob, not from Joseph. Yeah, okay. So they were all important because they came from Jacob. 12 sons of Jacob. 12 sons. That's a lot. God determined that they would become a nation, tribes, then nations, etc., etc. And of course, it all goes back to the promise God made to Abraham, I will make of thee great nation. I'll multiply you. I'll give you the land, and your seed is going to possess this land, and your seed will become great. Who blesses you, I will bless. Who curses you, I will curse. And he made some prophecies concerning how long they're going to be in Egypt. I think of Genesis 15, they're going to be in Egypt 400 years, etc., etc. So, now let's bring it down some more. So the 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 tribes of Israel, and then the nation begins to form. They're already now, how did they get in Egypt? That's a very key element too. How did they get in Egypt? Say it again. The world had a program when? Had food. Okay. So how did they get in Egypt? They went to Egypt to purchase food. That's true. But how did they get in Egypt? All right, go try it. What you? Correct. That's it. That's how they got to Egypt. Joseph was the key. Remember, he was sold as a slave. He was hated. His brothers didn't like him. Put him in Egypt. As a result, God says, okay, I'm going to work with you. And then he rises to the top, and then he brings the family into Egypt. Okay, so that's the key answer to the question. They came in through Joseph. And then there arise a king, according to Exodus 1, Exodus 2, somewhere around there, who knew not Joseph. Now, some folk in history talk about the Hyksos. The Hyksos was a group of people that kind of took over the pharaohs, and they defeated them because, you know, they were always in some kind of war. And so this fellow who took over, this is outside Hyksos, they were outside folks that came in, took over. Some people say 17 BCE, some say 15, some say 13. But whatever it was, this group came in, this king did not know Joseph. This guy took over, and he looked around, he see all them, he says, look here, make all them slaves. And it is said, it's also instead, in the outside history, is that there were other people that ran away that were put out as a result too when this group took over. There's, you know, those are just stories to kind of coincide with the Bible. I stand with the Bible. The Bible doesn't give us the rest of the information. Some of the information, it comes from archaeology, et cetera, and through other art. Boy, you never know how far art can go, hey, because sometimes the folk in excavating a land go into caves and literally find writings. And one such writings they found is the writings talking about folks saying, please help us, El, referring to God. God, we need your help. El, we need help. And the writings were right there in the caves, in the walls, right there. They documented as being at the time that the Jews were there, the Hebrews were there, the Israelites were there, and, you know, they were talking about the pressure that they was put under during that time. So the art drawing the animals and the history is maintained through this stuff. And you never dream that just a writing or a picture could reflect a lot of what was going on during a culture. So anyway, the Israelites are there in Egypt for 400 years. This person came who didn't know Joseph. He enslaves the Israelites, and then God brings them out by a mighty hand, by a powerful hand, because he raises up a guy by the name of Moses. Again, I'm telling you, this book is about the Jews. He raises up Moses. Moses comes on the scene. He is 40 years in the palace, 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness, and then 40 years in the wilderness again, because children of Israel didn't go. And he has 3 40-year periods. We kind of sum it up to say, first 40 years, he thought he was something. He was the king's son. The second 40 years, he realized he was nothing because he ran away out there because he had killed an Egyptian. And the last 40 years, he realized that you know, how God could use somebody who's nothing to make them something for his glory. So 3 40-year periods. He died when he was 120 years of age. Nothing wrong with his sight. His strength was still there. It's amazing. God just put him to sleep. God just says, okay, time to go home. Okay? Because he had sinned at that particular point in time, and God says, I have to deal with it this way. Anyway, if we went on with the story, they were delivered out of Egypt with a mighty hand, powerful hand, and that nation continued. And then, of course, we have some powers that took over them eventually. So Israel began to become, in the power. First king. They got a nation. These 12 tribes have now multiplied into thousands. During the Egyptian time, it is estimated there was 2 million of them. 1 to 2 million. And how did they come when they were put out or came out? Mighty hand, the Red Sea, etc. Again, we stress that when they came through the Red Sea, the waters that were baited, they were put aside for about 1.5 to 2 miles. So when they walked across, because some people have the idea that it was one little small spot, and they, kind of squeezed through on dry land. No, the scriptures indicate that it was quite some distance. And so they come out, Egypt, they start to formulate a nation. First king, somebody. Saul, King Saul. All right, second king, David. Now they say that the King Saul was chosen by the nation, the King David was chosen by God. Whichever way you look at it, the divine hand of God was on it. And God told Samuel, don't worry about it. I've been sending my prophets. I've been ruling this country. They reject me. They didn't reject you. They rejected me. And he says, they can pay for it. They got a king, they can pay tax. They got a king, their sons and their daughters going to be used in the fights, in the armies, in the wars. And they wouldn't have to go through all of that if I was their king. But since they want to use the human king, that's the price they're going to pay. He's going to take their taxes. He's going to take their food. He's going to take whatever's necessary to supply his army. God said that all there right in the word of God, letting them know that's what kings do. Okay, that's what they do. Some people get into politics and they think, okay, when I get this person as the leader in, it ain't going to happen. They're going to help us all the way. They do help. But guess what? Eventually, they have to support their army. They have to support their regime. They have to support the group that keeps them in power. They have to. That's the way it is. And so God says, you didn't want me to be the king. They rejected me. They'll have a king. And then God kind of surrendered later on and said, you know what? They should have chosen David, etc. He rejected Saul, took Saul out. After David, David had the kingship with everybody, all the tribes, 12 tribes. Then later on came Solomon, his son. There was a fight for that throne. Solomon comes on the scene. He has all 12 tribes. Then he started getting so involved with women, etc. God says, I'm taking this kingdom from you. But he said, I won't do it for David's sake. I won't do it now. I can do it when your son comes on the throne. So his son came on the throne, Rehoboam, and there was a split between the kings, between the tribes. The two southern tribes is called Judah, and the 10 northern tribes are called Israel. And so the 2 and the 10, that's how the tribes begin to operate, the 2 and the 10, the 2 and the 10. So you'll hear the kings of Israel. The kings of Israel, you could write one word over all of them. Bad, wicked. Ahab, all of them, wicked, bad. Kings of Judah, for the most part, they were the good kings. Okay? Some couple of bad ones in there, but for the most part, they were good. And what it was, the temple where God wanted to worship, where Solomon built the house, was in Judah. Then came the mighty powers. Okay, I'm jumping ahead. Mighty powers that took over the whole of Israel and Judah, all of them. Anybody knows the name of the first one? Mighty power, nation. Babylon. Babylon comes. Everything in our Bible relates to the Jews. So in the Bible it has Babylon, but in respect to the Jews. Babylon rules Nebuchadnezzar. You got the story there, bang, got that. Then somebody came and took over Babylon. Who's that? The Persians, the Medes and the Persians. They come over, and they did a strange thing. One guy says, okay, Nebuchadnezzar broke down all them things. He said, okay, tell you what, I'm going to let you all build your wall back and build this back. And so, man, wow, what a contrast. Then after that, the Medes and the Persians got defeated. Who defeated them? Okay, the Greeks. Alexander the Great. He died at age 33. He said, they say he was crying before he died. He said, ain't no more battles to fight, no more wars to win. I've conquered the world. He started crying. So that shows you what his passion was, to fight, so forth, and died at early age. Alexander the Great. Then after Alexander, after the Greeks, then who took over? All of these ruling over the Jews, Babylon over the Jews, the Medes and Persian over the Jews, the Greeks over the Jews. Rome took over them, beat them over the Jews. And that's how our Bible is. And when we come to the New Testament, it's Rome over the Jews. Jesus is operating under the Jews under Rome. The Jews are under Rome. They have to listen to Herod and all of them. Those are Romans. So you got a picture that all of it ruling over the Jews. And of course, Christ is born during that particular time, etc., etc. And then not until we reach the end of the Bible, the book of Revelation, we see the Jews again. And what we see? We see a temple being built. And that temple being built, Revelation 11, is an amazing temple because it's basically the third temple. I was going to show you a video on the other temple, but we got basically three temples. You have Solomon's temple, which he was decided, David prepared it, but Solomon built it. Said, I want to put you in a temple, God. I think you deserve worship. And then God gave them a system of operation, cherubims, everything. Nebuchadnezzar comes, destroys the temple. Beautiful temple. Later on, Herod helps to rebuild a portion of the temple. Where is this temple located? On a particular hill. Which particular hill? The hill that Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son on. Mount Moriah. Temple is built right there. But during the process of time, AD 70, when those Jews rose up against the Romans, Titus, the Roman general, said, okay, these Jews, they've been rising up against us. Literally destroyed it. It was Christ's prophecy that one stone of that temple would be left upon the other. We've heard that story before. AD 70 is when it took place. Jews were wiped out, scattered throughout the world, many of them slaughtered and died. Jews have been out of the land for 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And yet, miraculously, they start coming back again. Till 1948, they became a nation again. Then Hitler jumped up. And before Hitler was the Arabs there. Hitler jumped up and said, hey, let's get rid of them. How many did he destroy? Remember? 6 million Jews. He destroyed basically half the Jewish race. Spanish Inquisition, Russian, all of those stuff going on. People slaughtering Jews left, right, and center. Matter of fact, when Columbus left, the day he left to go on a trip that actually eventually brought him to the Bahamas, when he left, it was the same day when the Jewish Inquisition had taken place, where they came to slaughter Jews. Columbus had Jewish heritage, okay? And so it was very interesting. As you go through this Bible, you see how many things are connected with the Jew. And so it's an amazing thing that takes place there. Now, let me just give you this segment here, and then I got a video to show you for just 2 videos, very short. But with the wars that took place, it's amazing the different wars that they had. In 1948, right after Israel was given their independence to become a nation, the next day, the Arabs attacked them. Okay? That continued till 1949. 1956, there was another war. Again, Israel won that. I don't have time to go through that tonight. 1967, there was another war. They attacked again. Every time they attacked, Israel ended up with more territory. You'll see in the video coming up. 1973, 1982, every time they attack, Israel wins the battle. Remember now, it's a little small place and a little small segment. And I don't have time to go through all these, but the fact is, as small as they were, and now they're living, listen, they're living in a hornet's nest. Arabs all around. The temple, since they had been on the land so long, the temple, the Islam people built a mosque, a golden dome, where they worship. And the UN had said, you know what? We have to let them stay there. And so Israel is content to let them stay there. And so it's there. But that's where they want to build the next temple. Herod's temple was destroyed. That's the second one. What's his name? Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first one. Solomon built. Herod's temple destroyed. And they got a third temple going to be built so that in the tribulation period, you'll see that temple operating. Jews know where they want to build it. We are told that they're ready to build it and they could put it up in a day. They've got to oxen called heifers, the red heifers. And they say 2 perfect red heifers ready now because they have to make these sacrifices in the temple. So they purchased them just, 2 weeks ago? Say they're ready. Keep your eyes on Israel. Okay, let's quickly, but Mark, let's see if you could put on the videos, and then we'll close. These are 2 short videos.
Palestine went from this to this, and it didn't happen overnight. Up until the early 1900s, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, a religiously diverse land where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived alongside each other. Then, things begin to change. With the start of the Zionist movement in Europe, calling for the establishment of an independent Jewish state, ideally in Palestine, the first wave of European Jews start to immigrate. By the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses, and Palestine is under British rule. It's 1917. Britain declares its support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The number of Jewish settlers grow, fueling tensions between the Arabs and the Jews. The violence between the two sides caused Britain to bow out and let the UN take over. The UN approves of a plan to split Palestine into 2 states, Jewish Israel, Arab Palestine. The city of Jerusalem, which is sacred to Muslims, Christians, and Jews, is now a UN-controlled international zone. Jews accept the UN partition plan and declare independence as the State of Israel. But neighboring Arab countries object to the land takeover. This marks the beginning of the First Arab-Israeli War. Israel is victorious and makes a grab for the land intended for the Palestinian state under the UN. The land gets divided into 3 parts. Jordan occupies the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Egypt occupies Gaza, and the state of Israel takes 78% of historic Palestine, including West Jerusalem. 700,000 Palestinians become refugees as a result, and the day is remembered as a Nakba, the catastrophe. It's 1967. The 6-day war breaks out between Israel and neighboring Arab countries, and by the end of it, the map looks something like this. Palestine is now fully occupied by Israel. Despite the absence of a formal peace treaty, things start simmering down. Then Israelis start settling into Gaza and the West Bank, resulting in an Israeli-Palestinian struggle that gives rise to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Their main goal? To liberate Palestine from Israel by any means necessary. Fighting goes on for years. The PLO eventually accepts dividing the land between Palestine and Israel, but the conflict doesn't end there. More settlers make their way into Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. The international community considers this illegal. The frustration of the Palestinians leads to an intifada. As As a result, Hamas is born, a political movement determined to fight against Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The United States, Israel, and the PLO signed the Oslo Agreement to split the West Bank into 3 sections. Area A, under full Palestinian control. Area B, under joint Palestinian-Israeli control. And Area C, under full Israeli control. But the solution creates a problem. Area C contains the majority of West Bank's agricultural land, water, and minerals. Palestinians have limited access to these. Further peace talks prove unsuccessful. Palestinians lose hope, resulting in the second Intifada, and Israel begins building walls and setting checkpoints to control Palestinian movement. It's 2005. Israel withdraws from Gaza, but continues settlements in the West Bank. Hamas gains power in Gaza and splits from the Palestinian Authority, seeing it as being too secular. The West Bank and Gaza are now under separate leadership. Israel imposes a blockade restricting any form of movement by land, air, or sea. It's 2017, and this is the current situation of Palestine. There are solutions on the table, but will we see them implemented in our lifetime?
All right, now I put on the next one. And again, you see the small segment of land. There's so many wars that's going on with that small segment because that's an important territory. God said he loved them. He said, this land is yours. Bang, that's it. So we go on this next one. It's a little longer, and then we finish.
This is me driving in what I think is one of the most bizarre places in the world. I just crossed over from Israel into the West Bank. If you look at a map of where I'm driving right now, you'll see a jumbled mess of Palestinian towns and villages, which are shown in green, and Israeli settlements, which are in blue. Many people think of this territory as Palestine, but of the 3 million people living out here, almost 20% of them are Jewish Israeli citizens. The Israelis living out here are called settlers. They live in the West Bank, but they're citizens of Israel. As I drive, I'm looking at effectively 2 different nations woven into each other through decades of conflict. I visited 15 settlements all over the West Bank, talking to people who decided to pack up and move out into the middle of disputed land. We'll meet them in coming videos, but first I want to take a look at the maps that help explain how the West Bank got to look like this. So let's go back to 1948 when the map looked a lot different. Back then, all this land was controlled by Great Britain. And due to growing tensions between Jews and Arabs, the UN worked with Britain to split the land into 2 states. One for Jews, Israel, and another one for Arabs, Palestine. The Jews in the region accepted this plan and declared independence of the state of Israel. But the Arab states in the region saw this plan as just more European colonialism. They didn't accept the plan and instead declared war on Israel. Israel won the war, pushing well past the borders of the UN plan. During the peace negotiations, a ceasefire line was drawn in green ink. It became known as the Green Line. It wasn't necessarily a border, it was just a ceasefire line, with this being the state of Israel, and this section being controlled by Jordan, who had taken control of it during the war. The Jordanians named this newly seized land the West Bank because it was west of the Jordan River. The fragile ceasefire remained until 1967, when Israel fought another war with its Arab neighbors. Israel wasn't looking to take over land in this war, but in just 6 days of fighting, it blew past the Green Line and seized a whole swath of land, including the entire West Bank. Suddenly, Israel had a decision to make. Do they make the West Bank a part of Israel and give the 1.1 million Arabs living there Israeli citizenship and voting rights? Do they give the land back to their enemy Jordan? Or else do they let the people create their own Palestinian state? This became a major debate in Israeli politics. Many Israelis saw this war they just won as not just a military victory, but a religious sign that the Jews were meant to return to the place where a huge amount of Jewish history happened, the hills of the ancient Judea and Samaria, which is basically the entire West Bank. So while the government was debating what to do, Israeli civilians began moving into the West Bank without any permission from the government. They just started setting up homes, establishing a Jewish presence in this region. Suddenly, any debate about what to do with the West Bank had to take into account the growing number of Israeli civilians that were living there. But the rest of the world did not approve of this. As the settler presence grew, the UN issued a resolution saying that the settlements had no legal validity and that they constitute a serious obstruction to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. They were basically saying that this settler activity was totally illegal. Two different narratives emerged here. One said that Jewish civilians were moving onto mostly empty plots of land that they had captured in a war, and that had deep historical and spiritual significance to them. The other side, which is the side that most of the world took, said that these settlers were colonizing land to expand their nation. In spite of the international condemnation, the number of settlers in the West Bank grew. Over the next few decades, more and more factions of the Israeli government began to support the settler movement, allocating public resources and granting permits for building. The Israeli Housing Ministry and military began developing plans on how to develop the West Bank. They built roads throughout the entire region, allowing easy access between the settlements and mainland Israel. More and more building permits were given out, and planned communities began popping up all over the West Bank. The settlements slowly shifted from a fringe group of motivated civilians to an institutionalized part of Israeli society, totally supported by the state. Here are the Palestinian towns in the West Bank. Watch how the settlements weave throughout these Palestinian towns. Palestinians didn't like this encroachment. They began protesting, often with extreme violence. Between the violence and the condemnations from the international community of the settlements, the situation became unsustainable. So, in the mid-1990s, American President Bill Clinton, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat signed the Oslo Accords, agreements that established a Palestinian government and split the West Bank into three sections. Area A gave Palestinians total control over security and government. This makes up about 18% of the West Bank, but most of the Palestinian population centers are here. This was a big deal because it gave Palestinians self-rule for the first time. Area B was designated for Palestinian government control while retaining Israeli security control, meaning the Israeli military remains very present there. Area B is about 22% of the West Bank. Area C remained completely under the Israeli military and government control. This is where all the settlements are, in Area C. It's about 60% of the West Bank. So this is basically how we ended up with this mess of a map. Israelis can come and go from mainland Israel through really nice roads that go straight to the settlements. They call these roads flyovers because they bypass Palestinian villages and give easy access from one settlement to the other. But not every settlement has one of these flyover roads. Palestinians can drive on almost all the roads in the West Bank, but their movement is often more difficult, more restricted. They have to stop at checkpoints and get their car inspected sometimes. Sometimes it makes for some really long lines. But certainly one of the most difficult aspects of this carved-up land situation is how it hinders Palestinians from being able to build an economy. Area C, which is under Israeli control, contains the majority of the West Bank's agricultural land, as well as the water and mineral resources. Palestinian companies are severely restricted in accessing these resources, which takes a huge hit on their economy. So with these three sections agreed upon by both sides, the settlements continued to grow in Area C. But in 2005, something happened that would ignite even more passion for the settler movement in Israel. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to remove 8,500 settlers from the Gaza Strip, which was another disputed area where there was a lot of settlements. Seeing Israelis forcibly evicted, their homes demolished, left a huge mark on the country, especially the settlers. They immediately redoubled their effort to settle the West Bank, and the numbers continued to grow. Most people who think about a resolution to this conflict propose a two-state solution, meaning giving the Palestinians a state somewhere in this West Bank region. But if you look at this map, you can start to see that it's getting harder and harder to do that. The settlers living in the West Bank are not living in tents or caravans. They're living in developed communities with schools and hospitals and even a university. It's not going to be that easy to uproot these communities. In the next video, I'll go inside the settlements and talk to the people who are living there.
Jewish people come home. That's not going to change. Who are these nutcases who are moving out of their own will into this battle zone? They fail to realize the lifestyle that we actually have here.
I don't consider myself a settler, maybe, but I know other people do just because I cross a certain line and I go through a certain coast.
Okay, right. And so you see the conflict continues in that same little space of land. And that's a mess. I mean, where you got Palestinians and then all them spots and but Israel saying, hey, we want the land, we want agriculture, we provide the roads to come back to the main spot. And I don't know how they can solve that. The only way I can solve it is actually the folks that are there, like the Canaanites, God says, drive them all out. The land is Israel. And of course, I'm taking a little time to show you that scope of land. And it's Israel. Any questions before we miss? Any questions? Well, the truck is the truth. The word of God is amazing. Go ahead. Oh, you want to stand up? I don't even know they can put that on video. Any questions? Real quick. In the desert. Okay, you're talking about under Moses? Okay. Okay, yes. They had a cloud to guide them. It's called the glory cloud. It bright cloud in the day. In the night, it was a pillar of fire, a cloud of fire that guided them. Throughout the day, they knew where to move, they knew where to go, they knew which direction to go in. And you could imagine as they came to the land of Canaan the first time, the cloud is over there saying, go, go, go. They wouldn't go. And of course, that cloud actually came back when they were dealing with those fellas when they refused to go, when they put them to death right there. So yeah, they had a glory cloud that guided them, but they still, at the end of the journey, stopped short and says, we're not going to follow that cloud. So that's just, relate that to us as Christians. Sometimes we got all the guidance, all the word of God, and we still say, we're not going to do it. So let us hold faith. Let us be strong. Let us just be obedient. We got our glory cloud right now. That's the glory cloud. The Holy Spirit living in us is actually more than what they had. But that's how it is. All right? Anybody else? Go ahead and back. So Renee. Okay, very good question. The Islam, back when you go through history, you find that the Islam, the Arabs, when they started off, they were pretty close with, because they all came from Ishmael. All right? So they had the true God, the one God, El. But later on, when Muhammad came on the scene, there was a shift to Allah. And Allah is not El, is not God. They say that's their God, but when you go through what Allah is all about, you realize that's not the same in the Bible as God of the Bible. So you realize that even the Prophet Muhammad, in the Bible, there's scope in the Islam. If Donna was here tonight, she would tell you, because her brother, I spent a week with him in debates and discussion. But one of the things they don't believe Jesus died on the cross for nobody's sins. They say it's Judas who died on the cross. So their Allah and all of that is different altogether. But that's who they call God. But it's not the God of the Bible. It's not described. So yeah, it's a different God altogether. That's all I could say at this particular point, because that engenders another topic. Any other quick ones to answer? And I think it'd be good for you to look up the answer to this question. What is a Jew? That's the question Karen asked last week. I got some more answers. I was going to go to that, but I can't do it. Sister Karen. Yes. Yes, they're from Ishmael. Yes. Right. 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 So as you would go through the 12 tribes, where they are listed in the Bible, you would find, I think, 3 different listings of the 12 tribes. Because sometimes it seems that others, like Ephraim is, the scripture says something about Ephraim is something, I mean, he's backslidden, what? Leave him alone. He's rejected God, leave him alone. It was as if God says, okay, that tribe out, this one of Joseph's sons is in. And so you have those 3 different settles of tribes and different that came out. So you have 1 or 2 differences each time. So it's interesting. And then when you come to the book of Revelation, the 12 tribes are mentioned again. And so it's an interesting list that's there again. Some of them are wrapped up in the name, like how we say Judah and we say Israel. When we say Israel, we mean the 10. When we say Judah, we mean the 2. And so some names are given there that include some smaller ones, like Joseph's sons got involved in that also. So, and of course, the Levites were considered that special tribe. And of course, they in the back too, all the way back. All right? All right, let's look to the Lord in prayer. Ask the Lord to give us wisdom, because all of this, you read this, and you relate it to us as Christians. Okay, what are lessons we're learning? God has got a group of people, and they are indestructible. Even though they're going to suffer some things, as overall they're indestructible until God is ready. But even though this, I think this is one of the greatest lessons to learn. You could know about God and still not follow God. That's what Israel. They were God's people, and they wouldn't follow God. So we can't be like that. We have to learn the lesson now. We God's people, let's do what we're supposed to do. We're small, we're great, but hey, do what we're supposed to do. Follow God. Father, thank you for your word. Help us to follow you. Lord, I know we are not better than the Israelites, but we thank you that you are the God of grace and God of mercy. Help us as we follow you to be faithful. And we see these lessons that are learned here, and help us to put them into practice. Bless and protect us as we go now. In Christ's name, amen.